Unfortunately, we do have some more troubling news. The United States continues to be threatened by Russia, China, and people here in the United States itself. Now, I'm going to address what's going on, why this is turning into a bigger crisis than what we originally anticipated, and what this means for you and I moving forward. But in the meantime, even though we do have some bad news coming, we also have some good news. I want to explain what that good news is, and again, how this is going to impact you and I. So, all I ask is one thing, take 2 seconds, go ahead, hit that like button if you enjoy these daily updates, and now, let's begin. So if you are like most people, you turn on the news, you are going back and forth on social media, well, you're seeing all these different reports and all these bad stories. Well, I do have some good news for you. Look at this. It says the House and Senate release a bipartisan agreement on government funding as shutdown deadlines loom. It says the deal will see a government funding top line of $1.59 trillion. This is why it's such a big deal. This government funding bill is somewhat tied to border security. This is also tied to funding to Ukraine, funding to Taiwan, funding to Israel, which if Israel doesn't get any funding, well, some say that it's not a big deal. But if Taiwan doesn't get funding, that could mean devastation in the future for the United States, because we may have to go in and fight for them against China. That's one of the threats. Another threat is if Ukraine doesn't get any more funding. According to experts, they say Russia will win that war. If Russia wins that war, that will put increased pressure on the United States, because now Russia is one step closer to NATO territories. Again, which would put the United States under fire. I mean, the U.S. could potentially have to go to war with Russia. Again, that's troubling. But what does this mean for the attacks and the threats here on the United States? Well, that has to do with something a little different, and that is the border security. Here's what we know. Congress, as of right now, is attempting to pass a government funding bill, which has to be passed in the next 11 days. This has to be passed by January 19th, 2024. Well, they're getting close. They have agreed, but there's this cutoff is pushing another deadline or timeline for border security. Here's what's happening. As of right now, here's what we know. The Senate and the White House have reached agreements on many different things regarding border security. This includes tightening asylum interviews, expanding expedited deportation, and creating an authority to expel migrants without humanitarian screenings when border agents are overwhelmed. That's what they've agreed to, okay? So first off, tightening asylum interviews. That's a big one. The next one is expanding expedited deportations. So if border agents are too busy because they're overwhelmed with the amount of people coming into the United States, guess what? They are not going to bring in new border agents. No, they're going to deport you because you came at the wrong time. I know that's tough to do, but at the same time, they say that is easier than bringing in more funding and more border agents. Which again, how much funding do we need to equip the United States border with the right amount of agents? Because it's going to go one of two ways. You hire all these agents, great. Now we can process people much quicker, along the southern border. That's great. But here's the problem. What happens when all these people enter in the United States and now we have, double or triple the amount of border agents that we actually need? Then what do? Well, do we let go of those people? Possibly. But again, that's not a good look. Now, here's where things are at now. So even though the Senate and the White House have agreed to certain things regarding the border policies, they have not resolved their issues in other areas. Those include immigration parole. Okay? Immigration parole is a legal tool used by the Biden administration to resettle hundreds of thousands of immigrants. All right? And so this is the problem. They have not come to an agreement on that. All right? And I understand this is a tough thing, but the White House and Republicans are going to have to agree on something. According to this report, it says the White House weighs tough concession in border talks with Congress. The tough concession is parole. That's what they're talking about. Now, in previous demands with Republicans, Democrats said that they would never be able to accept a deal if it was restricting parole. They couldn't do it. However, on Friday, President Biden said, and President Biden's advisor stated that they know a border deal without limiting parole is not something that they're going to be able to pass. They understand that it has to include parole, or else this deal will fall apart. Now, experts believe that if Democrats agree to limit parole, Republicans would accept this deal quickly, and this would be put behind us. However, how quickly does this fix the border issues? That we don't know. It could happen immediately, which is the expectation. But again, there's still a lot of people here within the United States that are we going to start to send them back, or what are we going to do? That's where things get tricky. Now, this is the reason why this is such a big deal. Because as of right now, the Biden administration has very little options. One of their options that they're looking at right now, President Biden wants help from Mexico. But if we help Mexico, Mexico wants something, or Mexico helps the United States, Mexico wants something in return. I want to read you this. It says, in a press conference on Friday, López Obrador called on the United States to approve a plan that would deploy $20 billion to Latin America and Caribbean countries, suspend the U.S. blockade of Cuba, remove all sanctions against Venezuela, and grant at least 10 million Hispanics living in the United States the right to remain and work legally. That is where things fell apart. That is not something that the Biden administration is willing to agree to, simply because this is an election year. To give 10 million people the right to remain and work legally in the United States would be tough. We don't even have 10 million available jobs. So to allow 10 million people to remain and work legally, that would be something that would really hurt the economy. Okay? Now, to remove all sanctions against Venezuela, again, not something President Biden can do. Suspend the U.S. blockade of Cuba, again, probably not. And then the $20 billion, that would probably be the most likely thing that the United States could do. But again, we don't know. So that's where things are getting somewhat tricky. Now, without this border deal, though, here's the problem. The United States is looking closer and closer to a increased conflict with Russia and with China. The United States at this point, whether we give money to Israel or not, some are saying it doesn't really matter. Israel doesn't need it. Israel is widening this war over in the Middle East, and the United States should pull away from it, not get closer to it. So even though there's a good chance we are going to send some additional funding to Israel, some say that's not the priority. The priority is Ukraine and Taiwan. As long as those things are done in exchange for passing this border bill, then things will get back on track. But again, we'll have to wait and see. All I can tell you is that the threats to the United States are still there. But the good news is we are now seeing Congress and the White House work together, pass a bill for government funding. And if this happens, this pushes one less thing off the table. We don't have to worry about that. Get that done. And now secure border security. So that's where we're at this time. So just wanted to fill you in on what's going on at this time. The Senate and the House of Representatives, so all of Congress, come back tomorrow. So that will be a big day. We'll see what happens then. But again, I will bring you all the latest news and updates as soon as we get them. All I ask is one thing. Again, it takes 2 seconds. Go ahead and hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video. Again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.